Welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. Today, wow, what a special guest. We've got a living legend on the show, Bob Burg, co-author of The Go-Giver, and really one of the more influential people, I believe, in terms of the sales process and actually helping people deliver real value in a very positive, um, a positive manner that I think really reinforces the helping nature of sales. So, Bob, so happy you could join us today. Thanks for taking the time out to be on the show.
Oh, thank you, Greg. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, today we're going to talk about the focus on value, why giving more is the best business strategy. And if you've ever read The Go Giver, it's really that message is kind of at the heart of the story. Bob, before we jump into the show and into the topic at hand, can you give us a little bit about your own personal background, your own journey, The Go Giver, what's brought you to this point in your career?
Began as a broadcaster, first on radio and then television. I was the late night news guy for a very, very small ABC affiliate in the Midwest. I was horrible. And soon I found myself having graduated into sales. and
Okay.
having had no formal sales training, I floundered for the first few months and then came across a couple of books in a bookstore. This is 40 years ago. And picked up a couple of books. One was by Tom Hopkins, one was by Zig Ziglar, two of the legends in the sales space, true icons. And I always say I never read their books, I devoured them.
Mhm.
And within a few weeks, my sales began to go really, really well. And the lesson that taught me was that, if you have a methodology, if you have a system for doing something, you can pretty much accomplish anything within reason. And I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how to principles. So if it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, you know that all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired result of B. So that really inspired me to know that. So I just kept, reading books on sales, and back then it was cassette tape albums is what they were called. That shows my
Right.
age, right? And going to seminars, and but the best thing of all was learning that as important as learning the sales skills were, it was much deeper than that because i- i- there were constant suggestions to read books that would improve the mind, right? So it was suggested to read, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Think and Grow Rich, and The Magic of Thinking Big, and The Greatest Salesman in the World, and um, Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, and all these books that really show you that when it comes down to it, success is an inside job. It manifests itself outwardly, obviously, but it starts in here in the head and moves its way down into the heart. And Jim Rohn, the great business philosopher, used to talk about becoming the type of person, you're right, who was worthy of success. And so I became a personal development and sales junkie at that point, and it was fun. And so I eventually worked my way up to sales manager of a different company, and then started speaking and so forth. And yeah, and that's kind of how that began. It's been fun.
And tell me a little bit. So you're reading all these books and you're starting your own career, you're starting to speak. Tell me a little bit about the genesis of the Go Giver.
So back in the 90s, which always sounds funny saying that,
Yeah,
and what
right.
it was like in the 1920s and so forth, right? When they, "Oh, back in the old days in the 1890s," but yeah, back in the 90s, I had a book out called Endless Referrals, Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales, which was really a how-to book on it was written you know what? I'm going to change these glasses because it looks like the person watching is probably getting a thing. I just got these glasses and they're a bigger. thing. So I think the issue, yeah, that's going to
Yeah,
be
it's
like
good.
going to everybody. So, um, and so the endless referrals was written. It was a how-to book for people who were, entrepreneurs and salespeople who had a great product or service. They knew it provided lots of value, um, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable or confident going out into their local communities and building the kinds of relationships that would cause people to want to buy from them directly and or refer them to others. The basic premise of it was that, excuse me, all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And I've been saying that forever. And but again, it was a how-to book, and I'd always loved reading business parables since I'd been in sales. Parables are stories, so they connect on, I think, a much deeper heart-to-heart level than a how-to book. Both are good, but there's something special about a good parable. And but I'm not a parable writer, and so I kind of sat on the idea, and I fortunately got to meet John David Mann uh, in the early aughts, right? In the early 2000, and I was writing a column for a magazine. He was the editor in chief, and even back then, he had a wonderful reputation as a fantastic writer and a great human being. And I brought the idea to him about this idea that was not fleshed out by any means. It was just and I said, I would love for you to be the lead writer and storyteller because you could do this, something with this. It's out of my strength zone. And so it was really interesting because he and his back then fiance, now lovely wife Anna, they were visiting her mom on the west coast of Florida. You and I were talking about the Gulf Coast of Florida beforehand. Beautiful part of the state. And they took a drive over, about a 4-hour drive, and we had a 3-hour dinner and discussed the idea of the book. And even then, he wasn't totally sold on it because again, he was very busy back then. And but like he said to Anna, it's Bob. We have to at least really consider it, right? Which is again where the relationship comes in, right? And finally, a few weeks later, he called me and he said, "Yeah, I think this is a good idea. Let's do this." So, thanks to his expert writing, the book was completed in a few months. The tough part was finding a publisher. Our agent, Margaret McBride, wonderful agent, took her uh, uh, a year, and there were 24 rejections before the 25th publisher said yes. But turned out they were perfect for a wonderful publishing partner, a portfolio division or a book imprint, I guess they call it, of Penguin Random House, and supportive and fantastic. And so when it's supposed to happen, it happens. But it really goes to show, because a lot of people are surprised when we say we had so many rejections. It's sales. It's still sales. It doesn't matter that you have a product that you believe in. It's a matter of finding the right fit with the right people and going through a whole lot of no's before you get that yes. One of my or two of my great friends, and speaking of business parables, uh, Andrea Waltz and Richard Fenton, a husband and wife team, they have a beautiful parable called "Go for No," and the subtitle is "Yes is the destination, no is how you get there." And they
Whoa.
do a wonderful job of reframing the word no. Now that doesn't mean you have to like the no's.
Right.
We're human. Who likes to be told no? But it's part of getting to where you want to go.
It's a great story. And I don't know how many times I've heard people who have successful books or movie projects and talking about the number of rejections that are out there. And you always kind of wonder who's reviewing these manuscripts, but they have so many, I can understand it.
Sure.
And probably so many great ideas out there.
Mhm.
I just want to ask you, considering your own personal background in sales and The Go Giver, if you haven't read the book, it's about a salesperson who is really trying to hit his quota and really pushing to get his numbers and very aggressive. And then he meets this kind of a mysterious figure who kind of mentors him and shows him the way to um, provide value first to people and be a go giver and give value, instead of always asking for things. I don't know if I summarized that
It's
pretty
very good.
well.
Very well.
Did you, Bob, as the salesperson, walk that walk yourself and go through that and kind of evolve into that? Because I'm assuming it's loosely based on your own life and success.
Well, one reason why John and I named the key figure, the protege, the protagonist, Joe, is because he was everyman, every Joe, every Josephine. We've all been Joe. We've all been Josephine, right? That person who kind of had they had the potential, and they were good people. They were young and ambitious and aggressive, but they were focused on the wrong thing, right? And they just kind of needed to see where that wasn't the way they were going to be the most successful. When I was on the road speaking, and I used to speak at a lot of corporate sales conferences, and one of the things I would do when I first started the talk is I'd look over out of this field of salespeople, and I'd say, you know nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. And we'd all laugh, because we all know as salespeople, nobody's buying from us. But how easy is it to just forget?
Right.
Right? And we make it about ourselves, and we make it about our product, and we make it about what we did, right? But they're not buying because we have a quota. They're not going to buy because we have a sales goal, or we need the money, or even because we're nice people, right?
Yeah.
They're going to buy because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so, which, by the way, is great news for any sales professional who really has a heart to serve, right? But even for those people who it's not natural for them, or they haven't been brought up that way to do that, it turns out that hopefully they're open enough to see that it's actually in their best interest to put their self-interest to the side and focus on the value that they can bring to this prospective customer or client, right? And how do you do that? Well, you ask questions and you listen, right? And so when you can really take your focus off yourself and place it on them, that's just not some nice thing. It is. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a more fulfilling way of conducting business, but it's also the most profitable way, because it's only through that genuine discovery of their needs, their wants, their desires, how you can help them solve, excuse me, their problems and challenges, discovering how you can move them closer to happiness. That's the only way the sale is going to take place.
Yeah. I mean, that's such golden advice. And I think my experience has been that a lot of salespeople will come and they'll talk about themselves and they'll talk about their product, and they won't listen, like you said, to what the person needs. How do you shift that dynamic out there? How do you coach people on to get that, because salespeople, we got to eat, we got to make that quota, we have to sell. How do you calm yourself down and kind of shift that focus?
Yeah, and so the question becomes, how do you work with someone who, again, has that go taker mindset, which doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that's how they see things. Okay, that their job is to get the other person's money, by providing a service, but that's not their focus. Isn't the providing the service. Their focus is on the money from that other. And again, it doesn't work that way because they don't care about your need for money. Okay. So how do you share with someone a better way to do it? So let's say you were to have a one-on-one conversation with this person who's come to work with you, and he or she is a new salesperson, and they're and so let's use the example. I'm that person. And I really need the money, Greg. I mean, this go-giver stuff, focusing on the other person, that's great, but we'll worry about that once I have the money to
Right.
start doing that, right? Okay. So there's a false premise there. And that false premise is that the way to really make the sale is to focus on the money, not on value to the other person. That's a very false premise, but that is the premise. So, I can focus on them once I have the money. When I don't really need to make the money, then I can focus on that. And of course, it's just the opposite. However, the person doesn't know that yet. So let's say I'm that person. I really need the money. So my goal is to get this sale and get this money transferred from your bank account into mine. So you're my prospect, my sales prospect, and we're having a sales conversation. And I ask you questions because I've been trained to ask questions, but I'm not really listening in order to truly understand what you need. I'm more listening so that I can use that information to sharp angle you into a close later on. Okay. When you have an objection, I'm a little bit defensive because your objection, Greg, is keeping me from my money. So, I answer the question, but you can detect a little bit of impatience, right? And and I'm only answering the surface part of it. I'm giving the standard answer that I learned in Sales Training 101 to whatever it is you're objecting to. I'm trying to overcome that objection. I'm closing early and often, right? Because coffee is for closers, and and so forth. And so what I would ask is, and again, so I'm talking to you right now, the new salesperson, who I'm sharing this with, and I'm trying. So if you're my prospective customer, when I eventually ask for the sale, are you more likely or less likely to have trust in me and want to buy from me? And the answer is probably less likely, right? And the person will agree. Okay. Now, let's say I'm the same person. I still need the money. But now what I'm going to do is, rather than focus on the money and focus on myself and my own needs, I'm going to put my self interest to the side momentarily. Now, that doesn't mean I'm denying reality. It doesn't mean I'm not a self interested individual because, well, we're all self interested individuals to a certain point. That's just human nature. But what a pro does is they put that aside. Okay. And I'm going to focus on the immense value I can bring you, my prospective customer or client. Now, let's see how that might work out differently. So now I'm asking you questions, but now I'm really interested in your answers, and I'm listening, and I'm taking this in, wanting to know how this is going to help me to serve you, to provide value to you. In fact, even when you answer, I'm not going to assume I know exactly what you mean, because I know that as human beings, we all work from our own different sets of beliefs. We define words and terms differently. So I'm going to politely and really tactfully ask you to explain further and clarify so that I know that what you said and what you meant is what I heard and what I understood. Okay. Now, only after really being after assuring myself that I know what you need, want, and desire, am I going to now connect the benefits of my product or service with those needs, wants, and desires. When you have an objection, I'm going to welcome that objection. Okay. And I'm going to be glad that you asked it. I'm going to share with you, I'm glad you asked because you need to be comfortable with this process. But what I'm going to do is, rather than just answering the surface objection, which may not really be the true objection, I'm going to work, and rather than try to overcome the objection, I'm going to work effectively within the objection. And I'm going to work with you to get to the actual root of the objection, and then work with you in partnership to explain to the point that you then feel very comfortable. Okay. So now the true objection has been handled. Um, by the time I ask you for the order, I'm simply asking you to take action on something you've already told me you want to do. But more than that, you know, and you know in your heart that I have your well being at heart. Now, are you more likely or less likely to want to do business with me right now? And the answer is probably more likely. So this is how we share with a person who does not come in with this kind of understanding. This is how we kind of share with them why it's actually in their best interest to do it the go giver way as opposed to the go taker way.
And you probably don't know what those answers to those questions are going to be going into those meetings. Like you might have an idea what they need help with or what their real underlying problems are. But to me, those meetings are all about really asking a lot of questions and getting to know that person on a deeper level. And then I think it's to your point, like I think companies are so obsessed with their product and what it can do for them, but they're not really understanding what is going to motivate them like you are. Like the Challenger sale, I remember this one exercise they were trying to sell color printers. I think it was Xerox, and the printers had all these features and things like that, but they found out that the customers, they were like superintendents of the school, needed to boost scores. So they figured out that the color printers could actually print out color materials which would boost the score. So it's not like, hey, just it's got colors. It's like it is solving a problem.
Yeah. Well, the
That
Challenger Sale was a wonderful book, and just like its predecessor, Spin Selling by Neil Rackham, and Mr. Rackham gave them I think, wrote a great forward for the
Yep.
Challenger Sale. Spin meaning not political spin, but spin was situation. Oh gosh, situation, problem. Uh, yeah, and the in the end his needs pay off, and I'm not. Oh, implication was I. It's been a while since I read it, but yeah, I thought those two books, Spin Selling and the Challenger Sale, really redefined selling for the modern day, and the importance, of really understanding that it is not about your product or service. It's all about the needs. It's all about how that's going to, to affect in a good way your prospective customer or client.
So, well, is there anything else you want to get into in terms of just the principles behind the Go Giver philosophy and really how to apply that in every day? So it's like, okay, well, Bob, that's great, but I can't even get a meeting in the first place with these people to ask those questions. I mean, how can I even become a go giver if I can't even get in front of people?
Well, that would certainly be a problem. So don't do that. No. So yeah, well, I mean, this is where, depending upon your line of work, it's important to learn from those who've come before you, and so forth, how to go about the prospecting process correctly. I'm very relationship driven, and it's a matter of creating these know, like, and trust relationships with people who will then refer you and recommend you to others. But there's also a very legitimate time and place to be on the telephone and utilize that telephone, not just email and so forth. And inbound is great, attractions, all that's wonderful these ways, but don't ignore that the telephone is a very important tool. My good friend and colleague Art Subcheck, was his name, spelled SOBCZAK, businessbyphone.com, is probably the premier uh, authority when it comes to selling by phone, and his books and his weekly newsletter and so forth. I would recommend it to everybody, and so even if you're never on the phone, it's so good. It's such great information. But if you are on the phone, it's just a must. Um, but again, so there's all different types of ways to prospect, again, depending upon your business. And then, of course, once you have a customer or client, to then be able to naturally go in and transition into the referral and introduction element is also, very powerful. And again, there are people like Bill Cates out there who does a wonderful, wonderful job with that. People like Richard Weilman, who create such amazing experiences for customer, or teaches how to create such wonderful experiences for customers and clients that they will proactively, refer you. So there's all sorts of ways, but yeah, you've got to be able to get in front of people. And at the beginning, it can be a lot of work as you're getting that flywheel going.
Yeah. Well, tell me, Bob, you know, you've been in this business for a while. Give me your sense of where we're at society wise and even just in the business world with AI becoming so big in the scene, all this talks about agents and automation and things like that. Is the Go Giver is it still as relevant as it once was, or is it even maybe more so these days?
Yeah. And of course, you do such great work in terms of that online presence for people, to be able to utilize that in order to um in order to really market themselves effectively, right? And have people being able to connect with them and so forth. So that's so important. But one of the things, as well as anyone else is AI is a wonderful tool, but it's not a replacement for the relationship. And I think where people get into trouble with any new technology, is thinking that the technology is going to replace their need to create the relationship. Now, don't get me wrong, technology can help engender it. Technology can help further the relationship. Technology allows us to connect with people in the first place. We may never have been able to even reach without it. Okay. But it can never replace, we always talk about, B2C, business to consumer, B2B, business to business. It's still always H to H, human to human. And any way that we can use AI to do the work that we don't really need to be doing, if we can utilize AI, is absolutely wonderful. um, but it's still people to people, still human to human, and we forget that at our peril. So yeah, the principles of the Go Giver will remain, just as viable. Uh, Techniques change, strategies change, tactics change, and that's fine. That's very natural. But the principles of human relationships, and remember, with the all things being equal, people, right? It's not all things being equal. People will do business with and refer business to those computers they know, like, and trust. It's the people they know, like, and trust, and it's the people in front of the computer.
Well, let me ask you this, Bob. You talked a lot about the framework and the methodology and how important that is. And I think Go Giver is almost a bit of a philosophy too.
Mhm.
Um, how does that translate then into you mentioned tactics? Do you see people and have you seen people use the Go Giver and set up specific tactics and the whole basics of sales in terms of activities and getting my numbers and things like that? Does that the Go Giver philosophy work with that world?
Well, so this goes back to a question, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, when people say, "So, Bob, are you saying, we shouldn't have sales quotas?"
Right,
Okay. No, I'm not saying you shouldn't have. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. That's not the point. It's just understanding nobody's going to buy from you because of your sales quota.
right,
You say, "Well, should I have goals?" I love goals. More important than goals, though, are systems to be able to raise. So I'm much more of a key performance indicator person than I am the goal itself, because some things you can control and some things you can't. But the question is never, should you do this or that? Well, I mean, sometimes it's, should you do this or that, but in terms of what we're talking about, it's not a matter of should you have a quota, should you have goals, should you have. It's just understanding nobody's going to do business with you because of your quota or your goals or your KPIs or your anything, right? It's got to be about them. That's the only, really the only point.
yeah, okay. Um, got just a couple minutes. You mentioned you're working on a new book about influence, and I believe persuasion was part of it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and what your thoughts are on influence and persuasion these days.
Yeah, well, it's about people skills, really, and I believe that people skills more than ever, especially now with the prevalence of AI, which has now done what? It's leveled the playing field even more than it ever has before, right? So now, what is the unique advantage anybody has in terms of talent, skills, ability? Now, they're all important, absolutely, but they're all baseline, right?
Right.
You can reach a certain amount of success by having that talent and that ability and that skill. Absolutely. But it's only going to take you so far. The people who hit that real big stratospheric type of, amazing success, these are the people who can work effectively with other people. And, genuine influence is simply the ability to get the results you want when dealing with others while making them feel genuinely good about themselves. And the person who can master that, boy, they're really just 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Yeah, I remember I worked with this guy. He was a sales leader for our company, and he just had this quality about him that you wanted to be on his team. That you always felt he was looking out for you,
Yeah.
even though he's a real BSer. But he he really just had that quality that you're talking about, and that's
Mhm.
a special thing.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for spending time with us. It's been really fascinating to learn just the history of the Go Giver, and then bring your lessons up to today's what's happening today in the world with AI. And I really appreciate your time, and I know everybody appreciates the work you've done in the field.
Oh, my pleasure, Greg. Appreciate you as well. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, can you hold on for just a second after we end the stream? I also want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next edition of Thought Leaders Live.